Welcome to PECO Virtual School. This is Senior 3 Geography. Your facilitator today is Mr. Kasadayeko. Welcome to yet another PEP of Geography. Geography PEP 1, which looks at the geography of East Africa. From your Senior 1, Senior 2, you have been looking at regions outside your home, like North America. This morning, we introduce ourselves to Geography Paper 1, which looks at the geography of our home, East Africa. This paper comprises of two sections, Section A and Section B. Section A has 4 compulsory areas which make up 80% of your paper. These compulsory areas include objective questions, map reading, photographic interpretation, and field work. In the exams, you're expected to answer all the questions from those 4 compulsory areas, making up 80% of the total percentage you'll get from Geography Paper 1. Section B has questions where you're supposed to pick one question and answer it to make up the 20% that remains to make the 100% of that paper. Therefore, it is an important paper, and we have to put all our attention and mind every time you're handling, revising the geography of East Africa. It's important that you have an atlas with you every time you're listening into a tutorial of geography, and especially when you're revising the geography, because all the names, place names, feature names, it's important as you listen to them, as you read about them, you look up for them in the atlas. East Africa as a region is found in the eastern part of Africa as a continent. It is made up of 3 countries: Uganda, our homeland, Kenya, and Tanzania. The 3 countries make up the traditional part of East Africa. However, we have other countries that have joined the 3 traditional East African countries to make the East African community, and those include Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan. But in the exams, we examine only the 3 traditional East African countries. By location, you open the atlas. East Africa is located between latitudes approximately 4.5 degrees north. You look at the northern part of the map of East Africa, approximately 4 12.5 degrees north, and when you go down at the bottom of Tanzania, it's approximately 12.5 degrees south of the major latitude that crosses East Africa, the equator. If you want to look at if you want to identify the equator, look at Lake Victoria, the northern part of Lake Victoria. There is the line that crosses from the west, Kasese, across Lake Victoria to the east, north of Nairobi into Somalia. That latitude is the equator, the major latitude. So from the equator, as you move to the north, northern Uganda and northern Kenya is approximately 4.5 degrees north, and then southwards, southern Tanzania is approximately 12.5 degrees south of the equator. Then when you look at the west, we have the longitudes, and East Africa is located between longitudes approximately 29 degrees east. Look at the western part of Uganda and Tanzania. There is that line, vertical line, which is in the west. So it is approximately 29 degrees east and approximately 42 degrees east of the Greenwich. The Greenwich is the major longitude, and it crosses Africa in Ghana or through Ghana. Therefore, because the East African countries are to the east of Ghana, that is why we say that longitude 29 degrees east and 42 degrees east. So it means the whole of East Africa is to the east of the Greenwich meridian, which is in the west of Africa, or which crosses Africa through Ghana, which is in the western part of Africa. We can locate East African countries by identifying the countries and the features which border the three countries. Therefore, East Africa is bordered by, look at your map on the atlas. In the north, we have South Sudan, the newly created country, and Ethiopia. Those two countries border East Africa in the north. When you look to the northeast, it is bordered by Somalia. We can make reference to this introduction or this location to the sketch map showing the location of East Africa. So we have, this is Uganda, this is Kenya, this is Tanzania. So to the east of Uganda there is Kenya. To the south of Uganda there is Tanzania. To the west of Kenya there is Uganda. To the south of Kenya there is Tanzania. To the south of Uganda is Tanzania, and to the south of Kenya is Tanzania equally. To the north of Tanzania there is Uganda and Kenya. So those three countries make up the region of East Africa. So we are saying in the north we have South Sudan and Ethiopia bordering East African countries. Then we have Somalia in the northeast. We have the Indian Ocean to the east of East Africa. We have Mozambique to the south of East Africa. We have Malawi and Zambia to the southwest. We have Burundi, Rwanda, and DRC to the west of East Africa. So in the introduction, I told you the major latitude crossing East Africa is the equator. This line here, which is numbered 0 degrees. And then the longitude to the west is 30, but we said approximately 29 because there are these parts of East Africa which are before the easting, the longitude 30 degrees east. And then we said approximately 42 because there is a small portion that is outside 42, but most of the land area of East Africa lies before this longitude 42 degrees east. Therefore, this is the location of East Africa. We are locating it either by latitudes and longitudes, or we can locate East Africa by using the countries and features which surround the three, or which border the three East African countries. When you look at the Indian Ocean, we have three major islands. These major islands, Pemba, Zanzibar and Mafia, make up part of East Africa. Therefore, they are part of Tanzania and they are part of East Africa. So we have not included them as the East African countries because they are part of Tanzania. That is why when you look at the color of the shading, the color shaded for Tanzania is the color shaded for the three islands. So they are part of Tanzania and they are part of East Africa. So when you are told to locate East Africa, that is how we can locate it, either by using the longitudes and latitudes, or by using the countries which and features which border the three East African countries. Therefore, this part of the introduction is important because it opens us to the region that we are going to be handling in Senior 3 and in Senior 4, constituting Paper 1. And it is from this background that the objective questions are set, right from this background to whatever we shall look at under the geography of East Africa, where we shall look at the physical geography of East Africa and then the human geography of East Africa. The objective questions are set from the two parts of East Africa, or to the two geographies of East Africa, the physical geography and the human geography. And you're supposed to choose the most correct answer from the alternatives which are given, and it is that answer that you use or you give for each objective question. The geography of East Africa, as I said, is divided into two: the physical geography and the human geography. The physical geography looks at the physical setup of East Africa, the natural setup of East Africa, the geography that was created by God about East Africa. Then the human geography looks at the activities which are done by man as a way of utilizing the physical geography of East Africa. So the activities which man does with the help of the physical environment is what we call the human geography. Let us begin exploring the physical geography of East Africa. And by the physical geography of East Africa, we start by looking at the landscape of East Africa, the geographical composition of East Africa, and that is what we call the relief of East Africa. So let us introduce ourselves to the relief regions of East Africa. Relief simply means the way the land appears, or the general appearance of the landscape. Therefore, we're going to explore and see how does East Africa look like. How does the landscape of East Africa look like? So the relief of East Africa is not the same, or it's not uniform. It varies from one part of East Africa to another. And this relief, or the landscape, is divided into 4 major relief regions. The first relief region are the coastal plains. The coastal plains are low-lying lands and part of East Africa bordering the Indian Ocean. That's why they're called coastal, because they are bordering a major water body, which is the ocean. So these are plains. A plain is a relatively flat area. So that's why we say these are plains, in brackets, lowlands, which lie upon the sedimentary rocks. In future, we shall look at the rocks that make up East Africa, and we shall look at what sedimentary rocks are. But when you come to the coastal plains, the major type of rock found there is, or are, the sedimentary rocks. So this region runs from the sea, the ocean. We call it sea level, but this is that coastal part of the ocean where the water ends and the land begins. So it runs from the Indian Ocean at 0 degrees below sea level, 0 meters below sea level, to about 250 meters above sea level. So this is the part of land which runs below the coral reefs. These coral reefs are also types of sedimentary rocks. When we come to the coastal geography, we shall explain more about how the coral reefs are formed and what are they. So this land forming the coastal plains runs from the ocean. That's why we're saying below the coral reefs, which are found. Fringe means finding, so which are found at the coast in the Indian Ocean. So the land runs below the coast coral reefs from the water into the interior, or into the inside of East Africa, up to around 250 meters above sea level. So that land area is what we call the coastal plains. These plains extend about 160 kilometers wide in the southeastern part of Kenya. That is around the mouth of River Tana. When you look at your map, when you look at your atlas, you can see where River Tana pours its waters into the Indian Ocean. So that region there is an example, or is an area where the coastal plains lie. And then when you look at Tanzania, the lower part of River Rufiji, where River Rufiji enters into the Indian Ocean, in that area it is a little smaller. These plains are a little smaller or narrow compared to the Tana River Valley. it is broader around the Tana River and then narrower around the Rufiji River. So in southern Tanzania, it is only about 50 kilometers from the Indian Ocean into the interior. We shall have more explanation when we make reference to our map. So that is the first part of the Reef region of East Africa. And as you observe, you can try to look at some characteristics of this area. One, we've already said, the first characteristic, this area comprises of sedimentary rocks, which are mainly formed due to deposition of the river and the ocean. That is one. Two, this region also is characterized by coral reefs, geographical features which are found along the coast. Three, because we said the area is a lowland, therefore the characteristic there, we say this region is relatively flat. Then we said we've already mentioned a number of rivers. So the next characteristic we can say that this region is drained by numerous rivers, especially River Tana, or for example River Tana, River Rufiji, among others. So we can identify characteristics of this region using the introduction that we have given. Maybe when we come to vegetation, we shall identify that the major type of vegetation found in the coastal plains is what we call the mangrove forests. Take note of that. They are the mangrove forests, because it is one of the popular objective questions that you will that you will come across in your exams. So the major type of vegetation found along the coastal plains of East Africa are the mangrove forests. To the west of the coastal plains, as you're moving now to the interior of East Africa, we come across the second reef region, and this second reef region is called the Eastern Plateau. And the height of this plateau or this region lies between 250 meters to about 1,100 meters above sea level, although there are some places, like we shall see, which are a little higher than this in altitude. What is a plateau? When you look at a dictionary, a plateau simply means a raised, flat-topped piece of land. Raised, flat-topped piece of land. So to the west, to the western part of the coastal plains, as you're moving into the interior, we come across a reef region or a landscape which comprises of mainly the plateau. And that's why we say the western edge is a side of the coastal plains, is marked in most places by a steep climb to the main African plateau. So it's like you are ascending, you're climbing from the Indian Ocean into the interior. This region generally rises gradually as you're going into the interior, that is the west, but is interrupted by steep-sided, rounded inselbergs. Take note of this word. An inselberg is an example of a plateau, and by definition, an inselberg is an isolated hill in a relatively flat area. An isolated hill in a relatively flat area. So there are so many inselbergs which are found in this eastern plateau. And there are some mountain ranges. That's why I told you that there are some areas which rise above 1,100 meters. So there are some isolated mountain ranges. For example, the Taita Hills. The Taita Hills, when you look at your atlas, the Taita Hills are found in the southeastern part of Kenya. So look for these hills in your atlas, on your atlas. That map showing the physical geography of East Africa. Look for the Taita Hills in the southeastern part of Kenya. Those are isolated mountains, isolated hills, which are found in a relatively flat area. That's why we say it ranges between 250 to 1,100 meters above sea level. This region is more pronounced in Kenya, and the Kenyans, because of its appearance, got a Swahili word for that region, and they call it Nyika. They call it Nyika, and in Swahili, Nyika means an open grassland plain. An open grassland plain. So this region mainly comprises of grassland. That's why they call it open grassland, with isolated inselbergs or isolated hills or flat-topped raised pieces of land we are calling the plateau. However, some peoples wrongly use the word Nyika to refer to different parts of East Africa, which is incorrect. So this Nyika plateau is mainly located in what we call the Eastern Plateau, the part of land which is bordering the coastal plains to the west. That is our second relief region. You can identify the characteristics like we did under the coastal plains. For example, we can say that this relief region comprises of plateau ranging in height between 250 to 1,100 meters above sea level. 2, we can equally say that this region is characterized by isolated hills known as inselbergs. 3, we can say this region is characterized by open grassland vegetation or grassland vegetation, and so many other characteristics that we can identify. After the Eastern Plateau, to the west of the Eastern Plateau, we are getting deeper into the interior. We move from the ocean into the interior. We find the third relief region, and this relief region is called the Rift Valley. By definition, a Rift Valley is a wide and long depression. It is wide and long depression found on the earth's surface, but bordered by steep slopes which are called escarpments. So on either side of the Rift Valley we have steep slopes known as the escarpments. So it is a wide and long depression. That's why it's called a valley. It's a depression. But on either side of this depression we have steep slopes which we call escarpments. In East Africa, the Rift Valley is divided into two. We have the western part of the Rift Valley and the eastern part of the Rift Valley. The western part is found along the western border of Uganda and the western border of Tanzania. The eastern part of the Rift Valley is found in or through Kenya and then into Tanzania. The interior of Kenya and then the interior of Tanzania, to the south where the two join around Lake Malawi, and then moves down into Central Africa, Mozambique. These two branches of the Rift Valley are mainly characterized by steep sides, but with so many water bodies, most especially the lakes, and we call these the Rift Valley lakes. These Rift Valley lakes are distributed within the western arm and within the eastern arm. You can identify some of these lakes from your atlas. Look at the western arm of the Rift Valley, stretching from western Uganda into western Tanzania. We can take examples, identify them. For example, in western Uganda, we have Lake Albert. It is found in the Rift Valley. We have Lake George, is found in the Rift Valley. We have Lake Edward, found in the Rift Valley. Then when you go to western Tanzania, we have Lake Tanganyika, and then Lake Malawi, although it is in Malawi, but some part is in Tanzania. That's why we identify it within East Africa, because certain part of Lake Malawi is at the border with Tanzania. However, because this arm is deep, there are so many problems which are faced by people living around these lakes. Shipping or transport and fishing on these lakes is very hard because of mainly the violent storms. That's why on many occasions there are numerous accidents on Lake Albert which are reported in Uganda. So these accidents are mainly caused by the violent storms. Then this Rift Valley, as we said, equally has the eastern arm. The eastern arm, I told you, is found in the interior of Kenya, running from northwestern Kenya to around the southwestern Tanzania. So that is the eastern arm. It's the first part of the Rift Valley that you come across if you are moving from the Indian Ocean into the interior. After the coastal plains, we go to the plateau and then into the Rift Valley. So that part is the eastern arm. Then when you cross it into Uganda, as you're going into Congo, you come across the western arm of the Rift Valley. If you are in Tanzania, as you're moving from the Indian Ocean from Dar es Salaam, you go into the coastal plains, the plateau, and then the first part of the Rift Valley you come across is the eastern Rift Valley. When you cross it into Tabora, when you go to Lake Tanganyika, as you're crossing into DRC, you come across the western arm. So never be confused when you asked about the arms of the Rift Valley. Eastern, it is in the east, western in the west. So just like the western arm, the eastern arm is characterized equally by other large lakes. For example, we have Lake Turkana in northwestern Kenya, Lake Naivasha, Lake Natron, Lake Manyara, Lake Yasi, Baringo, Nakuru. Nakuru is an important leg, and so many objective questions are set about this leg. And this leg is particularly important because we shall look at it in tourism. It is a natural reserve for flamingos in East Africa. Therefore, it is an important leg. Millions of flamingos are found on the shores of this lake. So it is a commonly tested leg in the objectives because of tourism, because it is a natural reserve for flamingos. Then Magadi is yet another leg which is so common among the objective questions, equally because it has a major economic activity that is associated with it, and that is mining of soda ash. Soda ash. So these two countries, these two legs are commonly tested in the objective questions, so take note of them. Lake Nakuru because of flamingos, Lake Magadi because of salt or soda ash mining. So these are some of the lakes which are found in the eastern part of the Rift Valley. This eastern Rift Valley is a little wider and broader than the western arm. However, in the southern part of Kenya and northern part of Tanzania, the eastern arm of the Rift Valley is shallower and less sharply defined. So even when you look at the atlas, it is a little divided into so many branches. That's why we say it is less sharply defined than the western Rift Valley. The western Rift Valley is pronounced, but when you come to southern part of Kenya and northern part of Tanzania, this Rift Valley is less pronounced, and it is divided into so many parts, some going towards Mountain Kilimanjaro, others another part splitting up towards Lake Victoria, and therefore it is less pronounced than the western Rift Valley and the other part, the northern part of the eastern Rift Valley. Then when it extends to the southern part of Tanzania, we said it splits into the western part and the eastern part, and it dries out into Mozambique, into Central Africa. Then to the north of East Africa, this eastern arm extends beyond the frontiers of East Africa. Frontiers just mean the borders. So it extends beyond the borders of East Africa and goes into Ethiopia, into Egypt in the north. So it begins from Egypt, moves down into Ethiopia, and then into East Africa. So the northern part of the eastern Rift Valley extends northwards into Ethiopia, and then it goes up to Egypt. That's why we say it extends beyond the frontiers, the boundaries of East Africa. So that was the third part of the relief. That was the third relief region that makes up the physical geography of East Africa. Then 4, we have the Central and Lake Plateau. We call it Central because it's almost in the middle of East Africa, and we call it a Lake Plateau because it is associated with the largest lake we have in East Africa, that is Lake Victoria. So we say between the two rift valleys lie river valleys. There are so many rivers, and a saucer-shaped depression. River valleys, saucer-shaped depressions, and plateaus, which are of average height 1,200 meters. I told you a plateau refers to a raised, flat-topped piece of land. Those of you who are familiar with Lake Victoria, when you go to the shores of Lake Victoria, in any part of East Africa, you will see raised pieces of land which drop into the lake. So those are called the plateaus. Those of you from Masaka, those of you from Mukono, Buyukwe, Jinja, Tanzania, Mwanza, this relief is more pronounced around the shores of Lake Victoria. So that's why we call it the Central and the Lake Plateau. Most of the streams drain from these plateaus or the highlands, and then they pour their waters in the depression which is in the middle, the Central Depression. So that's why we have the name of the relief region called the Central and the Lake Plateau. This explains, so because this region is in between the Rift Valleys, the shape and the shape of these lakes are shallow in depth, irregular, and most often they have swamps. The shores of these lakes are swampy. Those of you come from the shores of Lake Victoria or districts surrounding Lake Victoria, around Lake Victoria there are so many swamps. Around Lake Kyoga there are so many swamps, just because there are so many rivers which are draining into these lakes. So the most important lakes found within the Central and Lake Plateau are Lake Kyoga in eastern Uganda, and then Lake Victoria in the southeastern part of Uganda, then Kenya and Tanzania. So it is the largest lake we have in East Africa. In the Rift Valley lakes, Lake Tanganyika is the deepest, and when you look at their shapes, they are different in shape. That the shape of Lake Victoria and Kyoga is different from the shape of the Rift Valley lakes. In the Rift Valley lakes, for them, their shapes or their shape is long. They tend to be narrow. These ones are broad, but the Rift Valley lakes are narrow. They are regular, while these two are irregular. For the Rift Valley lakes, they are regular. Their shape is almost the same. When you look at the shape of Tanganyika, it's almost the same as the shape of Albert. Check them. When you look at the shape of Albert, it's almost the same as the shape of Lake Malawi. Look at your atlas. So that's why we say their shape is regular. Then sometimes these lakes are very deep. That's why I told you the deepest is Lake Tanganyika. So that is our fourth relief region. The plateau is called the Lake Plateau because we said it is characterized by raised, flat-topped pieces of land which are dropping into mainly these two water bodies, Lake Victoria and Lake Kyoga. Then the last pronounced relief region of East Africa is what we call the highland region, or the highlands or mountains of East Africa. This region lies above 2,000 meters above sea level. So we say, rising above the general level of the plateau, there is an important geographical division or relief region which we are referring to as the highlands or the mountains. So the highlands and mountains are higher than the plateaus, because for them they stretch between 2,000 meters above sea level to almost 6,000 meters above sea level. We can look at the atlas and see, identify, look at the heights of the mountains in the atlas. For example, can you identify the height of Mountain Kilimanjaro? Can you identify the height of Mountain Kenya? Can you identify the height of Mountain Rwenzori? So when you look at Mountain Kilimanjaro, for example, it lies at a height of over 5,000 meters above sea level. So it is higher than the plateaus. Then when you look at Mountain Rwenzori, it lies above 4,000 meters above sea level. So that's why we call them mountains and the high lands. They are higher than the plateaus. This region is an important region of East Africa, and it is not only important because of altitude, because it is higher than the rest, but because it has other characteristics. For example, it experiences cool temperatures, it experiences very heavy rainfall, that's why we say moist, and then a healthy climate. So the highlands of East Africa, the mountains of East Africa, are high in altitude, cool, moist, with a healthy climate. And it is because of these characteristics that we call this region an important region, and it has become the most densely populated region in East Africa because of the climate, because of the volcanic fertile soils, which attract so many people for agriculture, for accommodation, and the other activities, or settlement, not accommodation but settlement and other activities. So the most pronounced examples of mountains in this region, we have Kilimanjaro, which is the highest mountain in East Africa, Kenya, Rwenzori is the highest mountain in Uganda. This one is the highest in East Africa. Kilimanjaro is the highest in East Africa. Rwenzori is the highest in Uganda. Look at your atlas and identify the heights of these two. You'll see that Kilimanjaro is higher than Rwenzori and other mountains and highlands in East Africa. Can you identify the other mountains on the atlas? Look out for them. And highlands, look out for them on the mountain, and you note them down. So those are the 5 major relief regions constituting the physical part of East Africa. This here we have a map. Compare this map with the map in the atlas, the relief map of East Africa in the atlas. And this is the physical map, or the map showing the relief regions of East Africa. The relief regions of East Africa. And we said from the Indian Ocean, which we are calling, or which we measured 0 degrees below sea level, we have, this is the coast. So stretching from this part of Kenya, actually Somalia, and then down to Tanzania. So this is what we call the coastal part of East Africa. It is where the land joins the water or the ocean. So from the coast, as you move into the interior, we come across the first relief region, which is the coastal plain, and it is covering the eastern part of Kenya. And when you look at this region, it is broader but a little narrow in southern Kenya and northern Tanzania. Then it broadens into the western part of Tanzania. So this is the first Rift region, and we said it is characterized by so many river mouths. So we have Tana, we have Athi and Garana, we have Pangani, we have Rufiji, and then at the bottom here we have Ruvuma. We shall look at the names of these rivers when you come to rivers of East Africa. Then as you move away from the coastal plains into the interior, we have the Eastern Plateau covering much of northern Kenya, central Kenya, and then down to northern Tanzania into southern Tanzania. This yellow part of the map is what we call the Northern Plateau. And I said in Kenya, the Kenyans got a Swahili name for this place and they call it the Nyika Plateau. So this is the part of the Eastern Plateau. Then from the Eastern Plateau, as you're going into the interior, we have the Rift Valley, although it is interrupted by mountains. That's why we said that the Nyika Plateau or the Eastern Plateau is interrupted by mountains, hills, Inselbergs and others. So we have the Rift Valley, and as we noted, the Rift Valley is divided into two parts, the eastern part and the western part. The eastern part stretches from northern Kenya downwards into southern Tanzania. At the southern end of Tanzania, southwestern part of Tanzania, the Rift Valley splits into two, the western and the eastern, and then drops into Malawi, Mozambique, goes downwards. Then this way, in the northern part, it extends into Ethiopia. And we said this area, the Rift Valley, is not sharply pronounced like the other parts of the Rift Valley. That's why you have these smaller distributions into Tanzania. So this is the eastern arm, and then that is the western arm. And we said the two branches are characterized by water bodies, the Rift Valley lakes. We have Albert, we have Edward and George, we have Kivu, although this one is in Rwanda, therefore we don't mention it because we said we are looking at traditionally the three, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. So Lake Kivu is not mentioned. So we have Tanganyika, then Lake Malawi, then we have Eyasi, Manyara, Natron. As you move upwards, Balingo, Magadi, Naivasha, up to Lake Turkana in the northwestern part of Kenya. So this is the physical map of East Africa, or the sketch map of East Africa showing the relief regions. So we have the relief regions here making up the landscape of East Africa. And we said the lakes in the Central Plateau have a different shape from the lakes in the Rift Valley. Look at the shape of Turkana and the shape of Victoria. The shape of Victoria is irregular, rugged. The size, Lake Victoria is broader, these ones are narrow. Therefore, because this is in a valley, these ones are shallow, while these ones are deep. So in the objectives, they may ask you about the shapes of these lakes, the shape of Victoria and then the shape of the Rift Valley lakes, the depth and others. When you look at Choga, its shape is irregular. You cannot know where it begins from and where it ends. So it is irregular, just like Victoria. So these are Then the last Rift region we said are the highlands and mountains. The highlands and mountains, and they are distributed within the Rift Valley, bordering the Rift Valley, and the different parts. We have these highlands. Aberdare, we shall look at them. We shall look at them when we come to the description of these different Rift regions. We have Kenya Highlands here. We have the Kigezi Highlands and Mfumbiro Ranges this way. We have the Western Highlands in the western part of Uganda. Then we have Rwenzori around here. We have Elgon, and then the highlands of Karamoja with the mountains like Napak, Moroto, Kadam, and others. So this is a highland region. And then in southern Tanzania we have other highlands. So the southern highlands of Tanzania with different mountains, for example Mbizi Mountains, the Kipengere Ranges, and others. They are found here. Then Kilimanjaro and Meru found in this area. So those are the 5 major Rift regions which make up the physical landscape of East Africa. So in the introduction I told you the land of East Africa is not uniform in height. The coastal plains are lower in height than the mountains. So the mountains are the highest regions of East Africa. The coastal plains are the lowest regions of East Africa in terms of height. Let us look at the drainage of East Africa. The drainage of East Africa constitutes lakes and rivers, the water bodies, the major water bodies that we have in East Africa. Now East Africa is blessed with a number of lakes. We've already identified them. For example, it has the largest lake, Victoria. It has the deepest lake, Tanganyika, and others like Albert, Choga, George, Edward, Turkana. You can look out for the other lakes from the atlas, mention them. Then we have major rivers, and the major river is River Nile because it is the longest in the world. So it is not only the longest in East Africa, but is equally the longest in the world. Then we have other rivers like Pangani, Ruvuma, Tana, Kagera, Kafu, Kirombero. Look out for more rivers on the atlas or in the atlas. Look out for them. We can identify them clearly on this sketch map that I've showed you, that I've put down for you, showing the major rivers and the lakes. So in Uganda we have River Nile, and River Nile has 2 major parts. We have the Albert Nile, which is in the western part, the northwestern part of Uganda, and the Victoria Nile. The Victoria Nile is that stretch of the Nile between Lake Victoria and Lake Choga. It's called the Victoria Nile. Then after Lake Choga we have the Albert Nile, between Lake Albert and the northwestern part of Uganda. That's why this region is called West Nile, because of the Albert Nile. Then we have other rivers. You look out for the names of these rivers in the atlas. River Achwa or Aswa in northern Uganda. Then we have River Kagera, River Katonga. Those of you come from Masaka, you cross this river, River Katonga. That's why we say Twasala Katonga, literally in Uganda, that we crossed Katonga as you're coming to Kampala. So those from western Uganda, you cross River Katonga as you're coming to central Uganda or Kampala. Then in Tanzania you have these particular lakes and a number of rivers. Look at the atlas and look for the names of these rivers. Put down this sketch map and name them. We have River Tana, one of the most pronounced rivers in Kenya, and then Galana Athi. Then in Tanzania we have River Rufiji, the most pronounced river in Tanzania, and Ruvuma. These two are the most pronounced in Tanzania. Then we have River Pangani and so many other rivers. Look out for the names of these rivers. This one is called Magaragasi River, draining into Lake Tanganyika. So there are so many rivers. Look at the atlas, look out for the names and put those names on your sketch map. It is important, my dear students, that you memorize and practice the shape of this map of East Africa, because in the exams, when they tell you draw a sketch map of East Africa, the first condition is the shape of East Africa. If you draw anything different from this shape, then whatever you put onto that map is wrong. So from the start, I implore you to begin practicing the drawing of the shape of this map. Practice that shape, drawing the shape of this map, because it is the most examinable skill of map drawing in paper 1. When you draw a wrong sketch, it means whatever you put on that sketch is wrong. Actually, when they're marking, they first put a tick for sketch. So if the sketch is right, they will put a tick and say sketch 1 mark. Then they look for the features which they have told you to indicate on that map. If the sketch is 0, it means any feature you put on that sketch will be wrong, so you don't earn any mark. So I implore you to begin from the start to practice the shape, drawing the shape of East Africa, and then putting the different features which they have asked you to put on the map. So that is a sketch map showing the distribution of the lakes and rivers. Try it out in your notebook. Draw it out in your notebook. It's important. Don't leave these sketches only on the soft copy that you're going to receive. Try them out in your own notebooks and draw them using a pencil in your own notebook, and that practice will enable you to understand, memorize, and master the shape of East Africa. Let's look at the importance of lakes and rivers in East Africa. And the question will normally be said, explain the importance of or the value of rivers and lakes to the people of East Africa. Explain the importance of value of rivers and lakes to the people of East Africa. In case you come across that question, the responses include the following. 1, we say rivers and lakes provide water for irrigation. One of the discouraged word in answering exams is they. Please always avoid using the word they when you are looking at the importance of a physical feature or an economic activity. We advise you to always write, if you're looking at importance of rivers, write the rivers. So you say rivers provide water, not they provide water. Lakes provide water, not they provide water. So the first importance, we're saying rivers and lakes provide water for irrigation purposes. For example, Lake Victoria. For example, River Kilombero in Tanzania. For example, River Nile. Then we have other rivers. When we come to agriculture, we shall look at the irrigation schemes in East Africa, and we shall come across so many irrigation schemes. For example, Kilombero irrigation scheme in Tanzania. They get their waters from River Kilombero. Then we shall look at Kibimba irrigation scheme in Uganda. They draw their waters from River Kibimba. Then we shall look at Doho irrigation scheme in Botareja. This one draws its waters from River Manafa, and so many others in Kenya. So when it comes to irrigation farming in East Africa, we shall get back to this importance, that these rivers, these lakes, provide water for irrigation purposes. 2, the rivers and lakes promote tourism in East Africa. Why? Because they have so many beautiful landforms. For example, along the rivers, we have waterfalls, we have rapids. Along the lakes, we have the beaches. I imagine most of you or some of you have taken trips to Western Uganda or to Masindi, and you visited Makshan Falls along River Nile. It's one of the beautiful waterfalls we have along River Nile. Then Bujagari Falls and others. So those features attract tourists, and that promotes tourism in East Africa, and from tourism we get foreign exchange. So in addition to getting money from outside by selling coffee, we equally get foreigners who come, pay us money, and we earn what we call foreign exchange. 3, the rivers and lakes are sources of fish. This is a delicacy to most of you. For example, the most common types of fish caught, for example, in Uganda, we have tilapia, we have Nile perch, and others. You know some of those types of fish that you purchase from the markets, and this fish is a food to most people because it is rich in proteins. Then this fish is mainly extracted from Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is the broadest, the largest in East Africa, and it is the major fishing ground in East Africa. Note that in the objectives you may come across that question: which of the following is the largest fishing ground in East Africa? So the answer is Lake Victoria. And the most common types of fish got from here are tilapia and Nile perch. Then we have other lakes: Choga, River Nile, River Tana, among others. Those are other fishing grounds. Then the lakes and rivers, I've discouraged you from using this. So lakes and rivers provide water for both domestic and industrial use. When you come to Uganda, most industries are found on the shores of Lake Victoria and the banks of River Nile. Large industries, for example, the Nile breweries in Jinja, Njeru. Then Nyanza textile mill, also in Jinja, Njeru, on the banks of River Nile, because the water is readily available. Then the Uganda breweries in Luzira for manufacturing beers. So water from these lakes, rivers, is used for both domestic and industrial purposes. Rivers and lakes, another importance, rivers and lakes promote navigation, water transport. So they are used for water transport, particularly Lake Victoria and the Lake Albert. These are interior water transport channels. On Lake Victoria, you have so many islands and there are so many boats, ferries, which are being used on this lake to cross or to connect the 3 East African countries. Ships, you can move from Uganda to Kenya to Tanzania via or across Lake Victoria. Then between Uganda and the Congo, most people cross this to these 2 countries using Lake Albert. So the rivers and lakes are important for water transport. Then the rivers and lakes promote interstate cooperation because some of them are shared by the 3 East African countries, like Lake Victoria. Therefore, the 3 countries have to cooperate to ensure that this lake is not misused in terms of overfishing, pollution, and others. Therefore, the lakes promote interstate cooperation. I've already told you Lake Albert is on the border of Uganda and the Congo. Lake Turkana, border of Kenya, Ethiopia. Lake Tanganyika on the border of Tanzania and the DRC. So those promote interstate cooperation, and in turn that promotes international trade. Then rivers and lakes modify the climate of the surrounding areas through the process of evaporation. That's why Lake Victoria or the shores of Lake Victoria are or receive rainfall most parts of the year, or heavy rainfall. They are the second wettest parts of East Africa after the highland areas. From the highland areas, we have the shores of Lake Victoria. So these lakes modify climate through this process, evaporation, and a lot of rainfall is received around these water bodies. And that type of rainfall is called convectional rainfall. Then we have another importance. Rivers and lakes help in generation of hydroelectric power. Can you identify the different power stations which have been constructed? Note them down along River Nile. Lake Victoria, we identify it because it is the major source of water for River Nile, and we know hydroelectric power is generated using water. So Lake Victoria provides a lot of water to River Nile, and so many power stations have been constructed along this river. So you note those power stations down. Then Pangani, Tana, and others. Rivers and lakes are grounds for research and the scientific study purpose or education. So many research purposes, so many educational tours are made to rivers and lakes. For example, I told you field work in PEP 1 is compulsory to all of you. Therefore, if you have not yet gone, you will make a field tour or a field trip, geography, and one of the areas that you will have to go to for education, for research, is or are either the rivers or the lakes. In Uganda, the most popular tour sites are Kasenyi landing site, and that is on the shores of Lake Victoria. Then we have another popular area, Makshon Falls, that is on River Nile. Most schools make trips to Makshon Falls, Kasenyi. Then Sezwa, because they are falls. Sipi in Kapchora, because of the Sipi falls. So those are areas of research and education. Then rivers and lakes provide employment opportunities to so many people. For example, researchers, for example, fishermen. Some of our relatives are or earn a living from these activities, most especially the activity of fishing. Then sand extraction. So these ones indirectly are offering employment to so many people, which makes them to have a better standard of living. Then rivers and lakes are dumping grounds for both domestic and industrial wastes. Although environmentally this may be dangerous, but most of the industrial wastes are dumped into water bodies. In one or another, it saves the population from contamination by these wastes, although they lead to pollution. It is not advised, but it is one importance. Therefore, we have to look for ways of minimizing the pollution rate of these wastes, but the areas where they can be dumped are the rivers, swamps, and the lakes. Rivers and lakes promote agriculture because they have fertile soils, or areas around them contain fertile alluvial soils, and this is the reason why the shores of Lake Victoria is well known for growing of coffee, growing of sugar canes, growing of bananas, and others. So these crops are grown around the shores of this lake, particularly because the shores are characterized by alluvial soils which are fertile. Alluvial means deposited soils. They are deposited by the lake and then the rivers which pour their waters in the lakes. Rivers and lakes act as international boundaries. We've already identified this on the map, that Lake Victoria is a boundary, or shares the boundary of Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. River Nile, the boundary of Uganda, South Sudan. Ruvuma, boundary of Tanzania and Mozambique. So there they share, or they promote, they form international boundaries. Then rivers and lakes are grounds for recreation. For example, boat riding, or what we call boating, swimming, sunbathing, because of the beautiful features like beaches which are found on the shores of these, especially the lakes. Can you identify in your country the major beaches where people go for recreation? You can note them down. The beaches where people go for recreation. Recreation is relaxing, leisure. That is recreation. So identify them. Put those beaches down before we come to tourism, where we shall look at them in details. Then rivers and lakes are habitats for fish. They are fishing grounds and other aquatic life. So they promote conservation of the aquatic life. Aquatic life animals like hippos, crocodiles, and others. Then the rivers and lakes are sources of government revenue. They are sources of government revenue, or they are resources from which the government gets revenue, and this is mainly through taxation and the other exchanges which are made from either water, like in Uganda we have the National Water and the Sewerage Corporation, that is a company that distributes, or the corporation that distributes water, and we're supposed to pay tax. We pay for that water, so that payment is the revenue that is got by the government. Then lakes and rivers provide building materials in form of sand and clay. Most buildings are constructed with the availability of sand. Then we have so many products from clay. For example, we have the tiles. In Uganda we have we have so many clay manufacturing companies, organizations. For example, we have the Uganda Clays in Kajansi. Then we have the Reza Clays also along Entebbe Road. So those are building materials which people get from the resources extracted around the shores of the lakes. Then the rivers and lakes are grounds for mining. I've already identified, I told you that Lake Magadi is particularly known for soda ash mining. Then currently there is a lot of oil prospecting and extraction, although it has not gone commercial, from Lake Albert, among others. So these are some of the contributions of, or the importances of, the water resources, especially the lakes and rivers that drain the landscape of East Africa. Now, these rivers and lakes, although we've seen that East Africa has so many of them, very big, very long, very wide, most of them are not commercially being utilized. So the water resources in East Africa are not fully utilized, and this is a result of so many problems, so many challenges. So below, let us identify the problems facing the utilization, the use of water resources in East Africa. One, most of the water resources, especially the oceans, the rivers, the lakes, have a challenge, a problem of storms and waves, violent storms and waves. I've already told you that Lake Albert is not fully used for navigation because of the challenge of violent storms which cause accidents. It is a common problem equally on Lake Victoria, and so many accidents occur, and that hinders the use of these lakes commercially for navigation. So that leads to loss of lives and property. Two, most of these water bodies have water weeds, particularly the water hyacinth, particularly the papyrus, what we call the floating vegetation. Like some of you from eastern Uganda, River Mpologoma is covered by a papyrus weed. Therefore, it's a very wide river, but it cannot be utilized for transport, for fishing, because of a floating vegetation, which is the papyrus. Lake Victoria is affected by the presence of the water hyacinth. So this makes water transport, makes fishing very difficult. The negative attitude of some people in East Africa, their communities, their tribes, their religions that prohibit, their cultures that prohibit, for example, eating of fish. For example, the Bahima is of recent that the Bahima have started eating fish, but traditionally the Bahimas were prohibited from eating fish. Then the Seventh-day Adventists, that is a religion where some types of fish are not permitted to be eaten, especially fish that does not have scales. It's not eaten by the Seventh-day Adventists. Then in Buganda, there are clans that use some types of fish as their totem. For example, the Mamba clan. So every member of the Mamba clan is prohibited from eating the Mamba fish or the lungfish. Therefore, that is negative attitude. It prohibits activities like fishing of some of these types of fish. Then some of these water bodies are shallow, and that hinders transport. For example, Choga, that's why most parts of Lake Choga are covered by papyrus. I've already told you Mpologoma River in eastern Uganda, it is shallow, and that's why it is covered by the papyrus vegetation. Then Lake Victoria in certain parts. Then some of these water bodies are bordered by steep escarpments, especially the Rift Valley lakes, because we say the Rift Valley is surrounded by steep sides which are called escarpments, and the Rift Valley lakes are found at the bottom of these rift valleys. So where the escarpments are too steep, these lakes cannot be easily accessed, especially Lake Albert, especially Lake Tanganyika is one of the problems hindering economic activities on Lake Albert. Actually, they normally ask questions in the objectives. Identify the major problems hindering, or the major problem hindering utilization of Lake Albert. The most correct answer is presence of the steep escarpments. Or if they don't bring it directly like that, the answer will be inaccessibility, difficulty of accessing the lake because of the steep escarpments. Then some rivers are seasonal and some lakes are seasonal, and this prohibits navigation and fishing. It is interesting when you visit some parts of East Africa during the dry season. For example, if you went to Karamoja and Turkana during the dry season, you'll cross bridges, but when you look under those bridges, you don't see any water. So you may get amused and begin laughing. Were these people serious to construct a bridge over a dry valley? But it is just because these rivers dry out during the dry season, but when it rains, they flow. That's why those bridges are constructed in those areas. So that prohibits or hinders navigation along those rivers and lakes which dry out. Then flooding is another problem, and this flooding paralyzes activities in East Africa. For example, agriculture. The shores and the banks of these rivers will not be fully utilized for agriculture because of fear of the floods that may destroy crops, and periodically, especially during the wet season. Then another challenge is water pollution, mainly by industries, which lead to death of aquatic animals or aquatic life, and this hinders development of or utilization of these water bodies for fishing. Then diseases, especially malaria and bilharzia, which are widely spread along the banks of rivers, along the shores of the lakes, particularly because some of these areas are breeding grounds for the disease vectors. Can you identify the disease vector for malaria? Equally, can you identify the disease vector for bilharzia? It's important that you understand and know what transmits malaria and what transmits bilharzia as examples that you'll be able to give. Then the swampy shores of some of these lakes make these water bodies inaccessible because of the swamps. Lake Victoria, Lake Kyoga are particularly affected by this problem. So accessibility to these lakes becomes difficult because of existence of so many swamps. Presence of waterfalls and rapids, and this hinders navigation. I implored you to identify the different waterfalls along River Nile. Some of them are here. We have Bujagari, we have Karuma, we have Makshon Falls. Actually, in the objectives, they normally said something to do with these examples. For example, they can tell you which of the following waterfalls is not found along River Nile. Then they give you the names: Bujagari, Karuma, Sezwa, Makshon. So which one would be the right answer? So you identify the right alternative, that Sezwa is not on River Nile. Or they may tell you which of the following waterfalls is found along River Nile. Then they'll mention one of these: Karuma as part A, B, Sezwa, C, Sipi, D, they give another, maybe Kindaruma. And then you have to look for the most right alternative, and the correct alternative will be that Karuma is along River Nile. So that is how they set your objectives from this information content that we study from the physical part of East Africa to the human part of East Africa. Then there is a challenge of low levels of technology, which hinders, for example, water transport, which hinders fishing, for example, use of the boats, the canoes, which cannot carry large load. Then using undersized nets. Some people use spears for fishing. Those are problems of low levels of technology. Then presence of predators and pirates. The predators create accidents, then the pirates create insecurity. Pirates are normally or mainly found, or is a major problem, especially on the large water bodies like the seas and the oceans. So they are dominant, especially in the Indian Ocean. It's a main problem. Then the predators, we have crocodiles in the rivers and lakes, then the hippos in the lakes. These ones mainly create accidents or cause accidents, and that may lead to loss of lives and destruction of property. Then poor fishing materials, leading to overfishing, and then indiscriminate fishing. Now, I've used poor, but I discourage you from using this word poor in geography. It is being phased out. So we could say underdeveloped fishing materials, underdeveloped fishing materials, or low levels of technology such as fishing materials, which may lead to overfishing, indiscriminate fishing. Then we have the challenge of flooding, which destroy lives and property. Accidents due to capsizing of boats, leading to loss of lives. Now this list are problems which are faced by people living around the rivers. we can extract them from the other list. The problems hindering the use of water resources. Now, people living around the rivers and lakes face these problems extracted from the previous challenges. So we are saying flooding, which destroys property and lives. Then accidents. This is mainly due to capsizing of boats, drowning and others, leading to loss of lives. Pollution, which is mainly created by or caused by the industries. I told you most industries are located along the water bodies because water is a very important raw material, and this lowers the quality of the water. Then we have pests and diseases. We can give these two as independent points in an exam when you're writing. So you can say the problem of pests, and then you give examples. For example, mosquitoes, water snails, which are dangerous to people. Then another problem, the problem of diseases such as malaria, bilharzia, which may lead to loss of lives. So you can separate those two and give them in an exam as two independent problems and answers. Then we have soil erosion. Still, even these ones, we can separate the two. Soil erosion, especially in the highlands, leading to destruction of property. Then landslides, and landslides are particularly common in the highland areas, and in Uganda they are particularly pronounced in Mbale, Bududa, Manafa, on the slopes of mountain Elgon. Then in Kasese, along the river Nyamwamba Valley, that is where the landslides are most pronounced, leading to loss of lives and destruction of property. Then unfavorable climatic conditions, which may lead to floods. This could be very heavy rainfall, which may lead to floods. Then around the Rift Valley lakes, very hot temperatures, because they're at the bottom of the Rift valleys, and this hinders settlement around those lakes because it is too hot. Then another challenge, another problem, presence of protruding rocks or rock outcrops. When you go to the lakes, when you go to the rivers, you see so many rocks, or you can see so many rocks, and those rocks hinder navigation. We shall look at these rock outcrops we find in lakes, oceans, their names when we come to coastal geomorphology, or the geography of the coast. Then many of the rivers are seasonal, I've already told you, especially in the semi-arid areas, Turkana, Karamoja, and I've amused you that when you go to Karamoja during the dry season, you cross bridges but over a dry valley. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being attentive to my presentation. I implore you to continue reading through